Nobody in that studio understood what they were watching. Not yet. It was 9:47 in the evening on October 14th, 1979. NBC Studio One in Burbank, California, was running warm. The kind of warm that only comes from 400 bodies pressed together under stage lighting, all of them leaning forward, all of them waiting. The Tonight Show was live. 11 million Americans were watching from their living rooms. Johnny Carson was at his desk, coffee mug to his left, that familiar half-smile already forming on his face. And Clint Eastwood, the most controlled man in Hollywood, the man who had built an entire career out of stillness and silence, was mid-sentence in the guest chair. Then he stopped talking, not paused, not searched for a word, stopped, completely. His eyes moved away from Carson, away from the cameras, away from the audience that had paid to be there, and settled somewhere in the third row. Nobody else saw what he saw. Not immediately. Carson leaned forward half an inch. The studio shifted. Not loudly, just a degree. Something had changed in the air, and nobody could name it yet. Then Clint Eastwood set down his water glass on the desk in front of him. Slowly, deliberately. The way a man sets something down when he has already made a decision, and the only thing left is to act on it. He stood up from the guest chair, walked around the desk, and disappeared into the audience. What he did next, in front of 400 people and 11 million more watching at home, would never fully make the papers. The cameras caught the edges of it. But what actually happened, what was said, what a 9-year-old boy had written in blue crayon the night before and carried folded in his pocket, and what Clint promised on his knees on that studio floor, that part stayed quiet for 11 years, until the card came out of his wallet. And those 7 words changed everything anyone thought they knew about the toughest man in Hollywood. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell, because the stories we tell on this channel are the ones that never made the headlines, but never left the people who lived them. But that moment didn't begin in Studio One. It didn't begin that evening. To understand what Clint Eastwood did on that stage, you first have to understand the man the world believed him to be, and the man he actually was behind it. By 1979, Clint Eastwood was not just a movie star, he was a symbol. Every Which Way But Loose had crossed $50 million at the box office. The outlaw Josie Wales had permanently rewritten what a Western hero could look like. Critics called him stone. Audiences called him untouchable. The image was simple and ironclad, a man who didn't bend, didn't flinch, didn't explain himself. His directors talked about how little he moved on camera. His co-stars talked about how much he communicated without a single word. His publicists loved him because he never caused surprises. Producers trusted him because he never went off script. Clint Eastwood, in the fall of 1979, was Hollywood's cleanest, most dependable definition of controlled strength. What the publicists didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was the other version. The checks written anonymously to families in Carmel whose names he had heard mentioned only once. The hospital visits logged under a fake name. The pattern of private decency that ran so completely opposite to the persona that sold tickets that the two seemed impossible to reconcile. Nobody had connected those dots publicly. Not yet. 900 miles north of Burbank, in a children's ward at Mercy General Hospital in Sacramento, a boy named Danny Mitchell was 9 years old and running out of time. He had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in March of 1979. He was small, partly the disease, partly just Danny, and he wore the same blue headscarf every single day because his older sister had tied it on him the morning after his hair fell out and told him it made him look like an explorer. He believed her. He wore it like a crown. The children's ward ran a simple program, 1 wish per patient when curative options narrowed. Danny's wish was not a theme park or a stadium. Danny Mitchell wanted to see Clint Eastwood in person. He had watched Every Which Way But Loose 4 times from a hospital bed. He told his mother Barbara one evening, quietly, the way children say the things that matter most. "I want to see what it looks like when someone wins, even when everything's against them." NBC's community liaison arranged 3 seats, 3rd row, right side. Danny wore his best sweater. And the night before the taping, alone in his hospital room, he picked up a blue crayon and wrote 1 sentence on an index card. He folded it twice and slipped it into his front pocket. He didn't show it to anyone, not his mother, not his nurse, not a single person in the world knew what that card said. He just carried it close. The way you carry something you're not sure you'll have the courage to give away. Clint arrived at NBC Studio 1 at 8:15 that evening. Wardrobe, green room, a quick briefing from his publicist, approved topics only. The new film, the Carmel rumors, nothing personal, nothing unscripted. Clint nodded the way he always nodded when he had already stopped listening. It was a standard night. That was the plan. The first segment went exactly as expected. Carson was sharp, the way he got when a guest matched his rhythm. And Clint was good, measured, giving just enough to keep the audience warm without giving anything away. The crowd laughed at the right moments. The cameras found their marks. Everything running clean. Then the first commercial break hit at 9:31, 90 seconds. A production assistant moved through the backstage corridor and handed Clint a small folded note. Standard procedure, notable audience members, anything the host might want to acknowledge on air. Clint opened it, read it once, then read it again. Row 3, right side, Danny Mitchell, age 9, leukemia, wish program, your fan. He held that note for 3 seconds before handing it back. Didn't say a word. The PA took it and disappeared. But something had shifted, quietly, invisibly, the way pressure shifts before a storm that hasn't announced itself yet. The second segment began, and Carson moved through his questions with the ease of a man who had done this 30 years and loved every minute of it. Clint answered. The audience responded. On the surface, nothing had changed. But Carson noticed, he would say so in a 1991 radio interview, that twice during that segment, Clint's eyes moved toward the 3rd row. Just briefly, just long enough for a man who read people for a living to catch it and file it away. At 9:41, 8 minutes into the second segment, the floor producer signaled from the wings. 2 fingers, circular motion, rapid toward the desk. Running long. Clint saw it, gave a small nod, kept talking. Because the problem was this. Somewhere in that 3rd row sat a 9-year-old boy who had used his one wish, his single irreversible wish, to be in this room. And the approved plan was to finish the sentence, laugh at Carson's next setup, shake hands at the desk, and walk off stage while the credits rolled and 11 million people reached for their remotes. The floor producer signaled again, firmer this time. Clint looked toward the 3rd row one last time. And somewhere between that signal and that look, the approved plan quietly ceased to exist. This story deserves to be heard by everyone who needs it. If it's already got you leaning forward, share it with someone right now, and subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. John, I need a minute. The last words. No explanation attached, no gesture toward the cameras, no glance at the producer, still signaling from the wings. Just 4 words spoken quietly across a desk on live national television. Carson heard them and did something that 30 years of broadcasting had trained him to do in exactly these moments. He read the room faster than anyone else in it. He set down his cards, leaned back, folded his hands, and waited. Whatever this was, it was real, and real things on live television were rarer than people understood. Clint stood up from the guest chair. The audience moved before they understood why. That low collective stir of 400 people registering something unusual before their minds had caught up with their instincts. Guests did not stand up mid-interview. Guests did not turn their backs to the desk. The floor producer took 1 step toward the stage. A camera operator swung his lens left, then right, searching for the shot. The stage manager's hand went up. a silent, urgent question to no one in particular. Clint didn't look at any of them. He stepped down from the platform and walked into the audience. The rows parted slightly as he moved through them. People pulled their knees in, leaned back, made space without being asked. The laughter that had filled that room 60 seconds ago was completely gone now, replaced by something quieter and more serious. 400 people holding their breath in the same direction. He moved past the first row, past the second. He stopped at the third. And then, Clint Eastwood, the man who had never flinched on screen or off, the man whose entire career was built on the image of someone who bowed to nothing, lowered himself to one knee on the carpet floor of The Tonight Show. Right there, under the stage lights, in front of the cameras and the audience and 11 million Americans at home, eye level, with a 9-year-old boy in a wheelchair wearing a blue headscarf and his best sweater. Nobody heard most of what was said. The boom microphone was still pointed at Carson's desk, but Barbara Mitchell was sitting 2 seats away, and she remembered every word with the precision of a mother who understood she was living through something she would need to carry forward. Clint looked at Danny and said, "I heard you used your wish to come here tonight." Danny nodded. Then, quiet and certain, the way children are when they've been thinking about something for a long time, he said, "I wanted to see if you look scared of anything up close." 4 seconds of silence passed. The floor producer had stopped moving. Carson hadn't shifted an inch. Then Clint said, low enough that Barbara almost missed it, "Scared every day, kid. That's the secret." Danny reached into his sweater pocket, pulled out the folded index card, held it out. Clint took it, unfolded it carefully, read it. His jaw tightened once, one single visible movement, and then he folded it back and placed it inside his jacket, against his chest, over his heart. Then he put his hand over both of Danny's folded hands and held them there. The first person to stand was a woman in the 5th row. Then a man behind her, then another, then another. Like something that had been waiting for permission, the entire studio rose, not cheering, not applauding in the way audiences applaud a performance, but standing the way people stand when they are witnessing something they know they will spend the rest of their lives trying to describe accurately. Carson stood too, behind his desk. And for the first time in 30 years of live television, Johnny Carson said absolutely nothing. Before Clint stood up, he leaned close to Danny's ear. Barbara heard it. She would not repeat it publicly for 11 years. What Clint whispered was not a compliment or a farewell. It was a specific promise, a day, a time, a place. Something that would cost him not money or effort, but the 3 things Clint Eastwood protected above everything else: his time, his privacy, and his ability to disappear. He made that promise on his knees on a studio floor, and he kept it. Starting the following Thursday. The show ended 11 minutes late. NBC Standards and Practices logged it as an unscripted audience segment. The floor producer filed a formal incident report. 3 network sponsors called the following morning to say it was the most powerful television they had ever witnessed. One called to complain about the schedule deviation. His call was not returned. Clint's publicist reached him at his hotel at 11:30 that night. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. She wanted a statement prepared, something warm, something controlled, something that could be angled toward the upcoming release. A human moment, perfectly positioned. Clint told her no statement, no interview about it, no leverage built from it. "It's not a story," he said. "It's just something that happened." She pushed. He hung up. 4 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, Clint Eastwood drove to Sacramento. No publicist, no photographer, no advance team, no announcement. He walked into the children's ward at Mercy General Hospital at 2:15 p.m., wearing his jacket and carrying nothing else. He stayed 4 hours. He sat with Danny. He played cards. He watched whatever was on the television mounted in the corner of the room. He talked about trucks and weather and whether orange sherbet was better than vanilla ice cream, which Danny insisted it was, firmly and without hesitation, the way 9-year-olds are firm about the things that matter. He came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that. Barbara Mitchell gave one interview, the Sacramento Bee, January 14, 1980. She described those visits the way people describe things they have memorized, because they knew, even while they were living them, that they would need to remember every detail. Clint didn't perform during those visits, didn't tell stories from set, didn't sign anything, didn't bring the version of himself that sold tickets. He just showed up, week after week, quietly, in a plastic chair by the window. He came, Barbara said. That was the whole thing. He just kept coming. Danny Mitchell died on December 3, 1979. He was 9 years old. He was wearing the blue headscarf. The index card, the one he had pressed into Clint's hands on the floor of The Tonight Show, was not with him when he died. He had given it away deliberately. He wanted Clint to keep it. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting us, like and share it right now, and subscribe, because the people behind the legends deserve to be remembered. And that's exactly what we do here. The Tonight Show episode from October 14th, 1979, aired without the unscripted segment on the West Coast delayed broadcast. NBC had edited it out before the tape crossed the time zone. But the live East Coast feed had already gone to 11 million homes, uncut and uncontrolled, and nothing that happens in 11 million living rooms stays quiet for long. Letters arrived at NBC for 6 consecutive weeks. More than 11,000 of them. Most were not about Clint Eastwood specifically. Most were from parents, from nurses, from people who had sat in rooms exactly like that children's ward and watched someone they loved disappear slowly, and who had learned in those rooms exactly who showed up and who didn't. The letters weren't asking for anything. They were just bearing witness, the same way 400 people had stood in Studio One without cheering, without performing, without knowing exactly why they were on their feet. Johnny Carson did not speak about that night publicly for 12 years. When he finally did, a 1991 CBS radio interview, brief and unguarded, he said one sentence that his producer would later describe as the most honest thing Carson ever put on record. "I've had presidents on that couch. I've had astronauts. That night with Clint and that boy is the only night in 30 years I felt like I was watching something real." What the public didn't know, what would only emerge slowly through hospital records and the quiet testimony of nurses who had no reason to invent stories, was that the Thursday visits to Sacramento were not an isolated gesture. Clint Eastwood had been doing versions of that for years, different cities, different wards, different names that never reached a single newspaper. Danny Mitchell's Thursday was not the beginning of something. It was just the first time anyone was close enough to see it. In 1990, a Los Angeles journalist asked Clint Eastwood one question that none of his publicists had pre-approved. "What do you carry with you that actually matters?" Clint reached into his wallet, pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases, the way paper gets when it has been opened and closed 10,000 times. He set it on the table without explanation and let the journalist read it first. 7 words, written in blue crayon by a 9-year-old boy the night before he used his one wish. Do brave people get scared too? That was the whole thing. That was what Danny Mitchell had carried folded in his pocket onto The Tonight Show. That was what he had pressed into the hands of the toughest man in Hollywood and trusted him to keep. Not an autograph request, not a photograph, a question. The one question that mattered most to a boy who was running out of time and needed the answer to be yes. Clint had answered it. Not on that studio floor, not with words, but every Thursday, in a plastic chair by a hospital window in Sacramento, showing up without cameras, without credit, without an audience. Some men perform their courage. Clint Eastwood lived his, quietly, repeatedly, in rooms where nobody was keeping score. Danny Mitchell knew it before anyone else did. That's why he saved his one wish to see it up close. If this story moved you, subscribe right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell us in the comments who in your life showed up when it mattered most.